is reporting that the Boston Celtics may be in the mix. Boston would be willing to include Jaylen Brown in trade offers. Going to be a little awkward next season for the Boston Celtics, but as a Miami Heat fan, I'm terrified of this.
It's been almost a month since Kevin Durant officially demanded a trade from the Brooklyn Nets, and as a result, there is a whole saga with Kyrie Irving as well. And recently, things have died down a decent amount as the market for Kevin Durant has settled, until today, where a team that actually swept Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets offered the Brooklyn Nets by far the most attractive package they could have gotten. So before we get to the content, man, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. If you want shorter versions of this content, then make sure you follow me on Instagram and on TikTok at TheFlightMike for both. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Boston Celtic fans, I know you're looking at my Laker jersey saying that I'm going to give some sort of biased take in regards to your team. That's not the case. I wanted to open this video by saying I am envious about the fact that the Boston Celtics have a significantly brighter future than my Los Angeles Lakers, and I'm not going to bring in any of the potential rivalry bias as a result of my Laker fandom. As a matter of fact, if you watch my last couple videos on the Los Angeles Lakers, you'd actually understand my disdain for what the franchise is doing and the situations that they're currently in. So here's where we currently are with the Kevin Durant saga. It's been a wild road thus far. Originally, Kevin Durant demanded a trade, and ironically, he demanded a trade to both of the top seeds in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. I know they're not the teams that ended up in the NBA Finals, but he demanded a trade to the Miami Heat or to the Phoenix Suns, which is ridiculously on brand for Kevin Durant, or at least on brand for the memes made about Kevin Durant. And originally what was thought was the Phoenix Suns would be able to enter the race for Kevin Durant by offering a package centered around DeAndre Ayton. After all, the Phoenix Suns didn't seem to be super enthused about giving DeAndre Ayton a max contract offer. They said this over the past year. They felt like they could win with any other traditional center that would get paid a fraction of the cost of what DeAndre Ayton's making, and then they could reinvest that money elsewhere. That's why they signed Mikal Bridges to a contract extension last offseason, which, bear in mind, DeAndre Ayton's draft classmate, but they didn't re-sign DeAndre Ayton until the very last minute when the Indiana Pacers essentially forced the Phoenix Suns' hand, which completely screwed over the Phoenix Suns because now their best trade asset for Kevin Durant, which would have been DeAndre Ayton, is no longer available to trade for Kevin Durant. DeAndre Ayton now has a no trade clause this year as a result of the Phoenix Suns matching the Indiana Pacers max contract offer, which in my opinion was a gigantic fumble for the Phoenix Suns front office, but I digress. But ultimately, man, I'm going to be honest, I think the Phoenix Suns are going to be okay, at least going into this year, assuming they could stay healthy and that Chris Paul doesn't take a gigantic step back. The issue that we've been running into recently for Kevin Durant is the Brooklyn Nets have him under contract over the next 4 seasons, which you might be wondering why Kevin Durant signed a contract like this to begin with, because typically, if you're a star player in the league, you would opt for flexibility to be able to opt out of your contract at any point so you could hit free agency and sign with whatever team you'd like to sign with. And if you look at Kyrie Irving, his contract included an opt-out clause for this past year, although he did opt in. In Kevin Durant's case, he's locked in for quite some time, and it's very atypical for a player of his caliber to do that. And the main reason he did that is because Kevin Durant understands, and he's very smart for understanding this, that there's a chance that he is not going to be the same player again in about 2 or 3 years down the line. I hope I'm wrong, but there is a decent chance, given the Achilles that he tore a few years ago and just his age in general. He's 34 years old. Kevin Durant is going into his 15th season in the NBA. So it just makes a lot of sense that KD would have opted for that flexibility when he did sign his contract extension. As a result, the Brooklyn Nets have him under contract and they could force him to play this year alongside Kyrie Irving if they wanted to. And originally, my philosophy was that the Brooklyn Nets are going to go into this season with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on their team. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's enough incentive for the Brooklyn Nets to trade Kyrie Irving to the Los Angeles Lakers for like Russell Westbrook, even if they do offer 2 future first round picks. I mean, personally, I don't think that's enough incentive, unless if they think they could rehabilitate Russell Westbrook's image and potentially ship him off during the trade deadline, which I think they might be capable of doing if they commit to a full-scale rebuild. But in the case of Kevin Durant, the Brooklyn Nets are essentially perceiving him as the player that he was 5 years ago or 6 years ago, where he clearly has a lot of good basketball ahead of him and he is still in his prime. Now, I'm not here to insult Kevin Durant because he's Kevin freaking Durant. He's one of the most transcendent talents that we've ever seen in NBA history. What I'm trying to say is I think it's very unfair for everyone to expect Kevin Durant to have the longevity that a player like LeBron James is currently having. I'm not saying he's not capable of doing it, but I think it's more reasonable to assume that Kevin Durant should start declining at the age of 36 or 37, which is why some teams might be a little apprehensive to trading for him, and especially when you consider some of the trade proposals that were already made for Kevin Durant. Bear in mind that any trade that is made for KD can't include a player like Andrew Wiggins or Devin Booker or Bam Adebayo or any player that recently signed a rookie max contract extension, because they currently have a player on their team that signed a rookie max contract extension in Ben Simmons, which means there's only a handful of teams that could really give the Brooklyn Nets the value that they're seeking. So one of those teams a while ago was the Golden State Warriors, and currently what we know about the Golden State Warriors is that they're not necessarily interested in trading for Kevin Durant anymore. And this kind of works out for both sides, man, because apparently Brooklyn Nets were not high on Andrew Wiggins or Jordan Poole in a Kevin Durant trade. This is coming to us via Zach Lowe, which again doesn't really matter because they can't trade for Andrew Wiggins to begin with. But in addition to this, man, Bob Myers came out and said that there's no way a trade is going to happen, primarily because it seems like Bob Myers is happy with the depth that the Golden State Warriors have, which he should be. I think the Golden State Warriors are in a situation where the Boston Celtics were in around 2017, except obviously to a completely different level, where they have good young talent that they could develop, but at the same time they have a championship core, and this gives that young talent some good experience and could really aid in their development moving forward. I don't think it's necessarily worth it to give up on players like Jordan Poole, James Wiseman, Jonathan Kuminga, and Moses Moody, and I don't know, maybe Andrew Wiggins, in order to try to bring in Kevin Durant again, especially when you are going based off of my philosophy that KD might only have 2 to 3 years left in the tank. I hope it's more, but just being reasonable, that's when we could expect him to decline. So if Golden State is out and Phoenix is out, that only leaves 3 teams currently that could really offer the Brooklyn Nets some value for Kevin Durant. Now, I don't think it's the value that the Brooklyn Nets want, but it is still value regardless. First being the Toronto Raptors, which they have Scotty Barnes, they have Pascal Siakam, they have Fred VanVleet, they have a bunch of players that look attractive to other teams, and they're currently sort of in NBA purgatory in the Eastern Conference. They have a plethora of assets. I doubt they would want to trade Scotty Barnes though. But the philosophy there is if they get a player like Kevin Durant alongside the players that they already currently have on their team and Nick Nurse, there's a chance that this team could jump back up to the top 3 in the Eastern Conference to compete for Eastern Conference supremacy. But if it's not the Toronto Raptors, the Miami Heat are also in pursuit, and they've always been in pursuit, but they would have to give up a package revolving around Duncan Robinson, Kyle Lowry, and Tyler Hero. They can't trade Bam Adebayo, so you can count them out. But a brand new team has entered the fold, and it's a surprising team. It's a team that actually swept the Brooklyn Nets this past year in the NBA playoffs, so that's the Boston Celtics. And what's crazy about this is we know all of the details of the Boston Celtics trade offer for Kevin Durant. So take a look at this, man. According to Shams Charania, first reported by Adrian Wojnarowski, the Boston Celtics are among teams to engage in trade talks with Brooklyn Nets on a possible Kevin Durant deal, sources say. So Adrian Wojnarowski says that as Brooklyn Nets star Kevin Durant's trade request approaches a 4th week, the Boston Celtics have emerged amongst teams engaged in talks on a possible deal. The Celtics appear to be no closer to acquiring Durant than others in discussions with the Nets, but Boston's ability to include all-star forward Jaylen Brown as a centerpiece in offers does help them make the team formidable in its pursuit, sources said. The Miami Heat, Phoenix Suns, and Toronto Raptors have been well known to have varying degrees of interest in Durant, but the Celtics have also been in regular contact with the Nets, sources said. Now, at this point, there are no deals believed to have traction for Kevin Durant, and no team has yet to reach the significant threshold that the Nets have set to trade one of the league's most talented players. The Nets posture on a potential trade has been largely unchanged. They want a massive return that potentially includes multiple unprotected first-round picks, pick swaps, and impactful players for Kevin Durant. So this is a huge problem because the Brooklyn Nets' perception of Kevin Durant's value might be a little different than the average team in the NBA. But at the same time, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, would you punt on potentially pursuing a NBA championship for a rebuild unless if you got a return that was worth it? Pretty much the Nets want what Sam Presti received for Paul George a few summers ago. They want a deal that's so freaking good that they'd be stupid to not enter a rebuild, especially when you consider that this team has like no assets whatsoever as a result of the James Harden trade. So take a look at this. The Celtics are willing to include Jaylen Brown, but they consider all NBA forward Jason Tatum off limits in any trade talks. But Boston is able to construct a package for Kevin Durant that could include Brown and as many as 3 unprotected first round picks and 2 pick swaps. Brown, 25, has 2 years and $56 million left on his current contract. So we also have Shams that came out with an additional report a few hours later that kind of touches on some of the stuff that I was talking about earlier on in this video. After the Phoenix Suns matched Indiana's $133 million max offer sheet to DeAndre Ayton, the list of suitors for Durant became clearer. With Ayton currently unable to be traded, the Suns appear to be all but eliminated from the Durant sweepstakes. The Toronto Raptors and Miami Heat remain amongst the teams in pursuit. The Boston Celtics recently offered a package around one-time All-Star Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant and have emerged as a real threat to acquire Kevin Durant, league sources tell The Athletic. So Adrian Wojnarowski told us what the Celtics could offer. Shams is telling us this is what the Celtics offered. The Boston Celtics reportedly offered Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a draft pick to the Nets for Kevin Durant. The proposal was rejected, and Brooklyn has asked Boston in any proposal to include Brown and Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart, draft picks, and potentially one more rotation player, those sources added. Currently, the Celtics are less inclined to include Smart along with multiple other players assets or pick assets, but the franchise is mulling over the next steps on how to approach discussions. Wait, because we are not even close to done. As of right now, the Celtics have emerged as a serious possibility as a landing spot for Kevin Durant. They have tremendous interest in bringing him in and view him as a piece that could take them over that final hurdle. Although there is work to be done, there is a deal to be had that would suffice the Nets' overwhelming ask. For Boston, fresh off a trip to the NBA Finals, the opportunity to potentially land one of the greatest players in league history is one that President Brad Stevens must analyze and explore. However, the Celtics are assuredly set to be judicious and are keen on ensuring the franchise can keep a championship contender for years to come, which this current core appears to be set to do. But this is Kevin Durant, and his greatness could instantly reshape a team's fortunes from a title contender to a title winner under the right circumstances. So right off the bat, man, we gotta look at this from a Kevin Durant's legacy standpoint. This guy wants to go to a team that will appreciate what he's contributed to that team. He's burned his bridges with the OKC Thunder. The Golden State Warriors, I mean, with all due respect, Warriors fans don't necessarily appreciate Kevin Durant's contributions to their team, mainly because they won before he got there and they won after he left. Not to say that they don't appreciate him at all whatsoever, but when you think of Kevin Durant in Golden State Warriors lore, where does he rank in regards to being one of the greatest Warriors of all time? That's something that Warriors fans can answer. So he went to Brooklyn and he did his best to take a team that hasn't necessarily contended for almost 2 decades and try to build them into a winner with Kyrie Irving, and that didn't work. If he goes to Boston and he's the difference between winning a championship for the Boston Celtics and not winning a championship for the Boston Celtics, Celtics fans would love him for years and years and years. I mean, look at the way they perceive Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett only had like 3 really remarkable years with the Boston Celtics before he started regressing. But regardless, Boston Celtics fans absolutely love him, and he loves Boston because, well, he won his only championship with the Boston Celtics despite him playing his best years with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But here's the thing, should the Boston Celtics pull the trigger on this move, I personally don't like it at all whatsoever. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to give up the Defensive Player of the Year, which, bear in mind, finding a great defensive guard to the point where they win Defensive Player of the Year is so rare in the NBA that I feel like once you acquire such a player, such as Marcus Smart, you should hold on to him for dear life. But Marcus Smart aside, aside, Jaylen Brown has been improving so much year after year after year. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, when the Boston Celtics originally drafted Jaylen Brown, I was a little apprehensive because at the time he was kind of perceived to be a reach. But he's developed so freaking well, making an all-star appearance during the 2021 to 2022 season, and if you ask me, he got snubbed this past season as well. He shot 40% from 3 last year while attempting 7.1 threes per game. That's before we get to how good this guy is defensively. He posted a positive DBPM this past year. He has a value over replacement player of a 2.2, and the most important part is he hasn't even hit his freaking prime yet. He's only 25 years old. If you ask me, do I think it makes sense to give up Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart and future first-round picks for Kevin Durant, who I hope he's able to stay healthy, but you don't know where he's going to be in a year from now or 2 years from now or even 3 years from now. Your championship window isn't even that tight. I mean, Jason Tatum hasn't even hit his prime yet. So if you ask me, I think it's in the Boston Celtics' best interest to stand pat. Of course, whenever you do have the facilities to make such a trade, you should analyze it as much as you can. And currently, it doesn't look like Jaylen Brown is exactly very excited about the fact that the Boston Celtics are actually considering trading him. I mean, look at his reaction, man. He just tweeted out SMH the moment he found out about this trade news. According to Mark Murphy, Jaylen Brown loves it in Boston. He was 2 games away from a championship. He's happy and looking forward to coming back. But like Kawhi, AD, and others on that level, he's going to be included in every report because of who he is. Honestly, man, I think this would be a huge mistake for the Boston Celtics. I think they should hold on to Jaylen Brown. I feel like they have something good going into the season, and they've improved over the offseason. Trading for Malcolm Brogdon whenever he's healthy is a great get for the Boston Celtics. So let me know in the comment section down below, especially if you're a Boston Celtic fan. Would you want to trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.